to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is an actress, a playwright, a director, a television show writer, a filmmaker, and, most relevantly to this podcast, the author of the novel The Serpent and the Rose. Her name is Catherine Butterfield, and here's my interview with Catherine. Catherine Butterfield, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I am an author. I have a new novel coming out that's a historical fiction. I've also worked in television and film. I've been a playwright, and I started out my career as an actress. So I'm touching all the bases.
Without spoiling too much of your novel, The Serpent and the Rose, and I understand this is the book that's soon to be released.
That's right. It's coming out actually in 2 days.
Well, it'll actually be out after I upload this episode. So, what will your book be about?
Well, then we can speak about it in the past tense. It's about Marguerite de Valois and her relationship with her incredibly Machiavellian mother, Catherine de Medici. And it takes place during the religious wars where Protestants and Catholics were basically slaughtering one another wholesale in France during the Renaissance. It's hard to imagine now people feeling that strongly about whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant, but it was a big deal back then. And she was caught right in the middle of it. She was forced to marry Henry of Navarre, who was like the leading Huguenot. Huguenot is another word for Protestant in this case. And she was a Catholic, a devout Catholic, as was the crown, the throne was in most of Paris. And it was supposed to pacify the two factions, to have a Catholic princess marry a Huguenot prince, but it did the opposite. It led to a huge slaughter in Paris. Unbelievably, French citizens, Parisian citizens in particular, were killing their neighbors, dragging them out into the streets and killing them, women and children included. Something like 20,000 people were murdered right after that wedding took place. So Marguerite, who was forced into this by her mother, it's the beginning of a story with her where she's basically doing battle with her mother her entire life.
Prior to writing your first novel, you worked in many other creative professions, including work as an actress, playwright, director, television writer, and filmmaker. And I have a couple of questions about that. How did your work in all of those other creative fields help you when you started writing The Serpent and the Rose?
Well, I think what I started to realize as I was writing the novel was that my strong suit is dialogue. It's, as an actress, of course, you use dialogue. As a playwright, it's all about dialogue. In my TV work, heavily featured dialogue, and it seemed my first draft of the novel was missing something, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was until someone else actually pointed out to me, dialogue is so key to the kind of work you do. I think you need more of it. And she was absolutely right. I went back and looked at it and found the moments in the script where Marguerite can report on what people said to one another, and suddenly the book came alive. So it was. I guess you have to acknowledge what your strong suits are. I'm not that good at, for instance, describing trees. I don't know the names of the trees, but I am really good at capturing how people speak.
Now, I'm surprised. Now, was getting dialogue worked into a novel, was that the hardest part of transitioning from a career as an actress, playwright, a TV show writer, filmmaker, etc., to writing a novel, or was there another part that was even harder?
That was not the hardest part. That suddenly made things much easier for me. The hardest part, I guess, it came surprisingly easy. was, structure. You've got to find a structure that is going to be satisfying to your reader. And I wanted to tell her story. The backstory on this, if I can go into it, is that I was in France and I was having dinner right next to the ruins of a chateau. And my host told me that this was the chateau where Marguerite de Valois and Henry of Navarre lived before he became king, which really fascinated me. And I started looking into them and found that she, Marguerite, is the first woman to have ever written and published her memoirs. And I read those memoirs, and they're very kind of archaic. They're like almost pre-Shakespearean, and plus they're in another language, so it's being translated. But I really felt that I got a sense of who she was, or at least it sparked my imagination in a very strong way. So I decided that what I wanted it to be was a life story for her. She had a fascinating life, and it ends up happily, really. I mean, she outlives her enemies. That's a pretty good way to end up. And so the challenge was to acquire a structure that made the whole thing satisfying for the reader.
Now, I read somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, when I was doing research for writing down the interview questions for this interview, I heard that you felt almost supernaturally possessed by the main character in your novel. Is this true? And if so, could you elaborate on that?
It is kind of true, but I know it sounds kind of woo woo too. Someone the other day at lunch was criticizing Bradley Cooper for saying he felt like he was inhabited by Leonard Bernstein. And so I think this happens to artists sometimes when we get so deeply involved in the character that we're trying to portray. We actually feel as though they are sitting beside us, dictating in a way. And I felt that Marguerite, who was the victim of a huge smear campaign during her life and even afterwards, was assisting me in helping tell her story in a way that showed her off for who she really was. The scandal sheets painted her as some kind of nymphomaniac who had sex with her brothers and had been groomed from the age of 11. It was horrible stuff. And I've discovered since then that they've done that to a lot of women in history. It's their way of trying to erase them. And so I felt very motivated to present her as the full, intelligent, wonderful, creative person that I felt that she was. And yeah, so it did feel like she was, because I was there in France. I was next to her chateau. I was walking through the Parc de Garonne, which she herself had personally designed. I did feel like I was accompanied by her, but not in a, I worked on a TV series called Ghost Whisperer, where, this character actually speaks to ghosts and, they tell her their problems. It wasn't like that. It was just, I felt a presence.
Now, Ghost Whisperer, the TV series you worked on, that's a different TV series than Ghosts. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm not sure what Ghosts is. Is that a recent show?
That's a newer series. I think CBS airs it.
Yeah, we were CBS too. Periodically, they roll out some program that has ghosts in it because they know the public really likes to see that stuff. But Ghost Whisperer was with Jennifer Love Hewitt, who used to be on Party of Five. And she just played this shopkeeper who saw ghosts and helped them. They were stranded in this earthly plane, and she helped them get to the other side where they needed to be. And none of the writers on the writing team actually believed in ghosts, but that doesn't matter because you're telling stories. And you can tell stories no matter, we all know what a ghost story is.
Is the Serpent and the Rose, is that self-published, traditionally published, or published via hybrid press?
It's hybrid press. It is Book Baby is the name of it. And but I would also say it's self-published in that I've been doing a lot of work. That if you went to a traditional publisher, I'd like to believe they would do for you.
Could you envision your book being turned into a feature length movie, a TV series, or both?
Yes, I think it could be a limited, like a 8 to 10 episode TV series for sure. Uh, it's written episodically. It's her journal, and she is telling her day-to-day activities that fits very nicely into episodes. Um, and I think that if you did about 10 of them, you might be able to capture the whole thing, the whole arc of her life. I also think you could make it a feature. Um, and that would work too, for sure. But it wouldn't be something like, tune back for season 2, tune back for season 3. It's got an ending, and I would want to honor that. I was just watching last night. I don't know if you have seen Sofia Vergara in Griselda, where she plays this Colombian drug lord. Do you know that?
I don't watch too many scripted TV series, which is odd because I'm writing a ton of fiction books, but a lot of my TV watching habits lean pretty heavily towards sports.
Oh, I see. Well, this show I found very interesting because she's first of all, Sofia Vergara is like the most beautiful woman on the planet, and somehow they made her look like this homely woman. But well, not homely, but certainly not as gorgeous as she is. But also because they took her story and made it into a 6 episode arc that is very satisfying. And I was thinking as I was watching it, yeah, we could do this. We could do this with Marguerite easily.
I'm going to ad lib here with the next question. Uh, if your book was ever turned into a feature length movie or a TV series or both, other than yourself, who would you want to play the main character?
Other than myself, huh? She starts out shockingly young. I don't ever say how young she is because I think that would kind of dismay readers. Who could play it? Well, you know what? I have a daughter who's a very talented actress. She's been on a number of TV series. Her name is Audrey Corsa, and I think she would be lovely in it. But you don't know who she is, so she's not famous enough yet. But she will be. Other than her, do you want someone famous that I can throw at you?
Sure.
Um, let's see. Um, who's got her kind of elegance and wit? They've already used Elle Fanning for the great. Uh, possibly Andy McDowell's daughter. She's just coming up. I saw her last night in Poor Things. She has a small role in that, and then I noticed in a trailer she's got a large role in something else, and she's pretty good. She might be a good choice. And I can't think of her name right now. Sorry.
That's okay. The next question, I didn't have this one written down, but you mentioned that The Serpent and the Rose has kind of a journal format to its plot. Now, did you outline uh, quite heavily before writing the manuscript, or did you just write the manuscript without doing a lot of outlining work beforehand?
It was kind of a combination. I did not heavily outline, I will confess. I knew, I just had a yellow pad that I wrote bullet points of where I wanted to go with it. Um, I know some people really extensively, write a whole treatment for what they're going to do. I didn't do that, and I never do that, even with my plays. But I sort of let the thing, I sort of jump on the train and go along with it and improve as I go. My first draft I wrote in a very short period of time. It was less than a month, but it was just a skeleton. And then my job for the rest of the year became to flesh it out. So maybe the skeleton might be what you would have considered the outline, but it wasn't really. It was actually a shorter novel. It was 60,000 words, and then it grew to 80,000.
My final question, do you plan on or are you considering writing more books? And if so, what are some ideas you have for books that you will or may write in the future?
Um, that is the $60,000 question right now because I never know exactly what I'm going to write next. And I've let my mind wander around other possible topics. Um, there's the idea of possibly tackling the other points of view in this story. What's Catherine's point of view? What's Henry's point of view? But I'm not sure that I want to pigeonhole myself as a historical fiction writer because it may very well be that the next novel takes place in modern day or current times, or it could be, I never know, frankly. I just wait for the topic to come to me, and then I'm very grateful when it does, and I work from there. But I have fallow times where there's nothing. This and possibly it's because I'm so engaged in all this post publication stuff. I've got nothing. But generally something comes up, so I just have to wait for it.
Catherine, you were an amazing guest. I thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus, and I wish you well with the release of your book.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Catherine was an intriguing guest for this podcast, and I hope to be able to read The Serpent and the Rose soon. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@Apollo and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.